Welcome everyone. Excited to have this webinar and talk about our new research. I'm Yishai Biri. I'm the CTO here at LinearB, and with me is Ben. Ben, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Ben Lloyd Pearson. I run developer experience here at LinearB. I have a background in platform engineering and helping organizations automate their bots and their PRs. So it's a very exciting topic for me.
That's great. Um, so we have an exciting topic today. We're going to talk about bot-generated PRs and what you can do or should be thinking about doing with those. Um, we have a lively chat room, so if you have questions and thoughts, please feel free to put them in the chat. We have Natalie from our team that will help us answer those. And let's dig in. So we're going to talk today about the like what are bot generated PRs, introduce this new relatively new phenomenon, the challenges, talk about some key insights from the report and the research that we've just published. You should have all received a copy of that report already, and we'll share it again at the end of this talk. Then we'll double click on the how-to, like an actual guide for managing and adding automations around those PRs to make sure that they're not cluttering your work. Um, we'll talk about some how customers are using this to streamline their PR processes, and then we'll touch on what's coming on the future, what's up. So let's start. Um, Ben, you want to walk us through the key numbers that we're seeing here? This is an interesting graph.
Yeah, so I think the if you only take one thing away from this session is that the bots, they're already here. Like this is something that has been developing for a number of years, but we're at a what it seems like a point of critical mass today, where it's becoming much more commonplace. So what we found through some research that we'll get into in just a moment is that bot generated PRs now are about 13, a little over 13% of the total number of code submissions that are being made to a lot of repositories or to companies' repositories. But further, we've seen a big surge in open source, as a great representation of what's happening among the larger ecosystem. And the primary two use cases that have emerged, I think, are Dependabot and Renovate. Like these are both sort of like bot agent style services that do various tasks on organizations' repositories. Um, so those have seen quite a bit of increased adoption. But beyond that, we're actually seeing quite a few additional use cases that are beginning to emerge. We're thinking things like um, you know, triggering test suites or backporting new features to older versions or managing improperly formatted pull requests. There's just a lot of new use cases that are sort of emerging. Um,
So
and I want to hand it back to you
13%,
for this last point. Yeah.
yeah, so 13%, that's a very big like portion of the code changes or the PRs that a team has to go through. Um, this is substantial. And you were saying we're also seeing this not just in our own data that we get from our customers and our users, but also from leading open source repos. Like this is happening across the board.
Yeah, exactly. And I think open source in particular is a great example to look at because they tend to be operating at scale. Like they actually behave very similar to like a large enterprise in many ways. So in that case, and they also tend to be ahead of the curve on a lot of new technologies. So I think they really are. It's a great place to look to get like a representation of the broader industry.
Right. So thinking about this, there's like one in every seven or eight or six even PRs that my team or my org is working on was not created by a human. It was created by a bot, a rule, something that is automated. It's obviously going to be faster than we are going to be to review that. Um, if we're not automating some of the handling of this, there's an automatic producer and manual work to get that reviewed and delivered, there's going to be a bottleneck. And point three here is we're going to like double click on this. There is a lot of this additional load that you can automate away and remove the toil, remove, 40, 50% of this additional load created by this flow by using SEI automations. SEI is like the category we're in, software engineering and intelligence. And those automations are basically smart ways to handle changes in your code base so that you can have something automatic, not just create the PRs, but also handle them and get them through your pipeline. So let's move on to start digging in to what we see in the report. Um, and we'll start by describing where we got the data and how we worked on this. So Linergy obviously sees a lot of data from a lot of customers and users and teams on our paid offerings and our free offerings. So this report was sourced from data covering almost 3,000 companies, roughly 500,000 of developers, and north of 3 million pull requests. So looking at all this activity, these are typically teams of people that get paid to write code and to deliver code, um, and analyzing the behaviors and the source of like who's creating those PRs, and can we find some patterns about how they're being handled. This is what we set out to do, and the result is this report that again you should all have received, that highlights the specific aspect of bot generated PRs. Those PRs that are not created by a human, but by some process, by some machine. A lot of them, like we mentioned, Dependabot, Renovate, and similar dependency management PRs, which are like an early example of a wider category that we'll talk about um, AI and other types of bots creating PRs. So
Yeah,
let's
and one thing I want to reiterate is that our demographics range from startups all the way up to massive enterprises and a pretty wide range of industries. So we really do believe this is a fairly accurate representation of the software industry at large. Like we've got a pretty good representation across all different slices of the industry.
great.
So let's get into some of the insights and go ahead and kick us off with what's insight number one.
Yeah, so the first interesting insight is that a lot of this work, a lot of these PRs get ignored. We all know that dealing with the dependency updates PRs, Dependabot renovates, and similar, that's not always the task that developers love. And what we find is that north of half of those updates never get merged. They are either left hanging, they're stale, they're at some point deleted when someone does a cleanup. Um, but a lot of them do not get merged, do not get handled. Many will get superseded by a later or more, like there's already a next PR with a better version of the same library and so on. So if you wait with handling them long enough, they'll become irrelevant. And so at the very least, they're cluttering your workspace. They're just there and hiding the real work that you want to do. But there's also important updates that you're not getting to your code base or to your dependencies because you're ignoring the Dependabot PRs. You're not pushing them forward. So you're either just pushing this toil away and then eventually someone gets a nice cleanup task to just remove all these PRs, or you maybe want to get these things merged, but you don't get to them. You have other work to do, and each may be a small item, but they add up, and they end up getting ignored or neglected.
Yeah, and what this really represents to me, as somebody who has been in the trenches as a developer, it's like this is noise, um, but more problematic is that it's unresolved noise. Like it's problems that are coming up that are distracting developers from the critical tasks that matter. It makes it harder to focus. Um, but because they're being left unresolved, it also creates a growing backlog. So it's actually like noise is almost increasing in volume over time. And what it really comes down to is like in that kind of environment, you're creating a lot of toil for your developers. Like imagine having to dig yourself out of that state if you've let it accumulate over a period of time. And I think that's a really great way to segue into our next topic or our next insight, which I think is going to boil down to rubber stamping. So, what's insight number two that we found?
Yeah, so if we look at the what's actually in those PRs, then we start seeing that, there's typical taxonomy of the patch updates, the minor updates, and then the major versions. And you can see roughly 40, a little more than 40% are patch updates, another 40 some percent are minor upgrades, and then 18% are major. So a very large swath of these PRs is either or should be extremely safe to handle, and these are the patch updates, or just safe or typically safe, which is the minor. And we've also seen that when teams are reviewing those, in many cases they're just saying like looks good to me. So people are already rubber stamping a lot of these PRs, like approving them because in many cases, I'm like maybe generalizing. Most developers would not actually review that pull request if a patch update. They will not go to the library documentation to read up. Um, they will probably want to make sure that all the tests are running and passing with this update and nothing has broken. But typically, the review is very, very minor. And if you have decent ability to test the code changes, um, then that's all you're going to do. Um, if you don't have decent testing, then actually looking at the diffs or understanding what has changed in the underlying library and understanding whether that is going to break your changes, that's way above the effort level that people are typically willing to put into this. And they have a bigger problem about dependency management.
Yeah.
Um, but they don't have a direct ability to review in depth the change. And so they end up rubber stamping or ignoring. And this represents a huge opportunity to automate. If you're already not doing something for real, or you're neglecting or deferring it because no one likes to do this, these together present a huge opportunity to approve. So you can think about how can we automatically approve those if everything passes? Can we do that for patches? Can we do that for minors? And so on. That's the opportunity that is arising here.
Yeah, and even if it is a rubber stamp that they have to engage in, it's still a context switch. You really want your developers to focus on, creating new value, on adding new features, on solving like bigger challenges. But if you're asking them to context switch back to this rubber stamp mode, you're pulling them out of that like more productive mindset that makes them so valuable to your organization. And the reality then is that you end up either in one of two positions. So either you're forcing your developers to immediately context switch for that rubber stamp, which can be, create a very poor experience for them. It can really disrupt their productivity if they're focused on like high focus work. Um, so that's not a great situation. Or you're putting them into a comparably bad situation where you're treating it more like housekeeping. So in that situation, you might say, well, let's every once per week or once per sprint, let's make sure we've merged all of our Dependabot updates or all of our bot updates. Um, but if you're treating it that way, then that means that there's a period of time where you're exposed to a potential vulnerability, and you actually probably don't really even have awareness, or visibility into any vulnerabilities at that point.
Yeah,
And I think that's a great way to segue into insight number three that we
right. And
have.
frankly, I'm paying developers way too much if all their if for their time to be spent on like these chores. Just, let's grab
Right.
the 20 PRs that added up and get them merged. If they're not applying their skills and their experience here and just, fingers clicking buttons, to me this screams automation.
Yep, exactly. So let's talk about insight number three, which is related to that vulnerability issue that I just brought
Right.
up.
So reminding everyone here, security updates typically find their way into the world as patches, right? There's a vulnerability or a security issue found. uh, library vendors or developers rush to fix it. They backport the fix to some previous versions so that even people that are not on the latest and greatest can get that security fix. So the common manifestation of a security or availability fix is going to be a patch. So there's a patch update there with fixing what could be a burning issue. And if we look at the graph here, we're seeing this is a box plot of like how long do the PRs take to actually get merged into the code base, the ones that actually get merged. And we can see that the typical or the median here is like a little over 4 days, so 4.5 days, 4.3. And um, like 3 out of 4 pull requests get merged within like a little over 12 days. So this is the period where your code base, your product is using older versions, which have an available patch update. In many cases, it's going to be a security related patch update. And that time is basically exposure time. You could have sealed that exposure or apply that patch much faster with automation. Um, there's also you mentioned end of the week kind of chores. Looking at these, like up to half of the PRs wait for about a week, a little over four days. That's typically the length of a work week. And then the other batch or the other interesting time, like is the 2 weeks, right? A little over 12 days roughly correlates with that 2 week sprint. So this could be hinting that people are waiting to the end of the sprint for some event to go and clean up, or waiting for end of the week kind of cadence. In both cases, you are you are living with outdated libraries longer than you can, and longer than you typically want.
Yeah, and it kind of indicates to me that people are probably falling more into the camp of treating it like housekeeping rather than being something that they immediately resolve, which I think is a really natural response to to a tool like this, right? But the issue, even with regular housekeeping work, even if it's still important and still something you have to get done, when you're talking about a software engineering team, that's something that's clogging up your sprint. So that's going to impact even if all you're doing is clicking green buttons for renovate or dependabot, that's still time that's being taken away from other tasks that you're being the business is relying on you to deliver on. And I think that brings us is a great way to segue into our final point here about visibility as it relates to these. So, what do we know about traceability with these bots?
Yeah, so another big number. Practically all of those PRs are not linked to any PM tool to your project management. There's no Jira ticket connected to them. There's no Azure Boards item. So they're not part of what you trace and the work that is typically traced in project management. There is no visibility outside of the Git tooling to understand who's done what when. Um, how much of an effort did this take from the team? Um, all of these concerns typically live and get tracked in project management. You mentioned cluttering the sprint. If there is um, a set of work needed to be done in the sprint, and now we've added some housekeeping, and it's now not tracked, no one can tell outside of maybe the team or the developer that did this, that this was an additional piece of work that maybe we should plan for and include in our sprint planning. If we are tracking the level of investment we're doing across the different types of work, working on new features, fixing bugs, updating dependencies, there's no way for us to track that amount of work if it's not linked back to our the key place where we track and plan work. And not to mention at the end, there is compliance regimes and regulations in some cases that require that every change to the code base is traced back to some ticket or to some change management process. This varies, but this could be a SOC 2 type 2 or other types of regulation where um, you may be doing the wrong thing by making code changes that are not tracked back to a project management tool. And even, connecting these PRs to a ticket, that's another piece of toil. No developer that I've met likes to create tickets or to link PRs to tickets or all of that manual work. So if it's not happening across the board, it means developers don't want to do it. I'm seeing here in the 96%. I'm also seeing it in the 54% that we showed earlier of these PRs getting neglected. These numbers tell me developers don't want to do this. When developers don't want to do this, they don't do it. And the solution is to help them automate this, develop their way out of the problem. It's never like tell them to do it or regulate them into doing it. That doesn't work and is counterproductive.
Yeah, I think you can't be more right on your point about no developer wanting to have to go in and update their project management tasks. That's one of the last things they want to think about. But I think what this boils down to is, this represents hours that your developers are spending on maintenance that I think a lot of organizations just don't have visibility into. Like they aren't even aware that this is a problem or what the scope of that problem is. Um, and at the end of the day, you don't, it makes it hard to know if your developers have the time that they need to focus on like more strategic initiatives. And speaking of automation, let's get into this next section where we're going to start going from the findings to offering some advice on how to take advantage or how to, take advantage of these bots and automation. Like you said, you can't expect your developers to manage this toil all themselves. So we have a way, or we work with quite a few customers in organizations to implement bot agent automations to manage these workflows. So, visibility is half the battle. So, once you've looked at these metrics and seen an analysis about the bots that you have running on your organization, that's part of it. But once you're at that point, naturally you're going to want to take action on what you find and make improvements. So the next logical step that we see with most organizations is implementing, as we referenced earlier, software engineering intelligence workflow automations. Um, so we have a tool named Gitstream. It's our workflow automation engine. And Gitstream enables you to use YAML files inside of your code repositories to optimize the code review process. So think about things like automating reviews or managing certain guidelines and requirements within repos. So, at a high level, though, the goal with Gitstream is to help you eliminate manual tasks, some of the toil that we've referred to, reduce that toil, but also just ultimately help you shorten your cycle time. So at the end of the day, we want organizations to use these tools to become more productive. And, so when you've implemented these solutions, you should, as an organization, be able to just deliver software more efficiently and more effectively.
Yeah, I mean, uh, there is an opportunity to automate something that is like a manual or toil task for a developer. Um, every developer I've talked to wants that. No one wants to spend the time doing stupid stuff or thoughtless work. And a lot of the what happens during the life cycle of a pull request adds up to that.
Yep. Yep, exactly. And we'll focus on one example, and it's only one example that we've picked simply because Dependabot is like the most commonly used bot that we've found out in the market. So we naturally have focused on there. But what we're trying to help organizations take away from this is that there's a lot of ways to implement these workflow automations for your bots. And every organization is different in terms of their maturity, how much they've adopted, the types of problems that they're solving. So, but we'll focus on one problem just as an example, and that's auto merging Dependabot updates. So, if we think about this as a challenge, uh, there's we showed earlier how about 40% of all Dependabot updates are classified as a patch, and about another 40% or so are classified as a minor update. So we have a lot of organizations that use this automation that we're looking at here. So on the right side, it's the YAML configuration, or at least a portion of the YAML configuration. And then on the left side, you're seeing some of the interactions that, again, Gitstream, our workflow automation engine, has with Dependabot on a repo. So we've made it really easy with this tool, for example, to detect what type of update it is, whether it's major, minor, patch, and then implement custom workflows based on those results. And when we're talking custom workflows, I'm not just talking about the version for Dependabot. I'm also referring to the needs of individual repos or organizations or teams. So if whatever level of comfort you have with automation for a specific team or project or repository, you can use Gitstream to implement a workflow around that. So, you know, as I mentioned, this is a very simple example. All it does is detect if it's a Dependabot update, detects if it's a major, minor uh, patch update, and then implements a workflow review automation based on that. So some organizations will auto merge, and we'll get into a customer example in just a moment. Some organizations auto merge, patches and minor updates. Other organizations don't auto merge any of it, but they will auto approve some of them. And then other organizations are in other places. So
Right. And we've seen examples where, there are some libraries where even patch updates are notorious to be, breaking, or we've had history of problems, so we can exclude those. We can apply more automation in some repos and less in others. There's full control. But the underlying premise here is that there's a lot of toil we can take away by let's just automate based on a rule. My developers are gonna rubber stamp this anyway, so let's rubber stamp it for them.
yeah, and so let's focus on an organization that has gone through this transformation. So we recently worked with one team at a Fortune 500 company. They adopted Gitstream last year, and here we're looking at a chart of their the number of PRs that they're automating for this specific use case. So when this organization came in, they pretty much immediately got comfortable with this idea of defining certain types of PRs that are safe to be automatically approved. So when they initially were rolling out this use case, they were focused more on what I would classify as like safe changes or low risk changes. So it's things like documentation updates, READMEs, image assets, other sorts of like non-production changes that don't have like a significant risk for, their production systems. And they started implementing like a select group of automations to just like get all of that type of classification of work out of the way of their developers so they can focus on the bigger challenges. And that's what you see here referenced in the quote on the right side. After a few months of running with this, we decided to, or they invited us in to help them run a hackathon for Gitstream automations, with the primary goal being to identify new use cases for automation. And one big result is they came out of this adopting the Dependabot automation that we just showed you. And the rapid growth in approve and then or automatically approved PRs that you see in red, but then also a growth in automatically merged PRs that you see in blue are both the result of adopting workflow automations for Dependabot, but also they use Renovate within the organization as well. So today, and this blew my mind when I looked this up, but nearly 28% of their PRs are now auto approved. So this is counting both safe changes and bot automations. But I mean, approving more than one out of every four PRs automatically by default. Like, imagine how much of a cognitive burden like this organization is now taking off their developers.
Yeah, I mean, all of this, these PRs previously manually approved by people. That's not the best part of my day as a developer when I have to review and approve something that a rule could do for me. So yeah, almost 1 in 3 PRs. That's huge.
Yeah. So, but we both think there's another wave of this coming. Isn't that right, Yishai?
Yeah, so we look at, the Penabot, Renovate, and similar, very, we call them bots. They're, simple programs. Um, a lot of value around the security and compliance areas, but this is just um, the tip of the iceberg. So, we've seen that 3x growth in these types of workflows in just, the past 2 years. It's not slowing down. It's getting adopted, commercially and in open source. Um, that's just one use case. Now with Gen AI and AI agents, and there's going to be, and there's already are starting to see smarter bots that actually create pull requests from Jira tickets, or um, you know, uh, create a pull request that will add unit tests for my code base, or migrate or refactor areas in my code base. There are so many use cases that now have bots with varying degrees of intelligence, if you like, um, that create pull requests and start like mutating the code base through those pull requests. What we've seen so far is just the very early beginning. So if now these are, I don't know, 13% of the PRs, this will very quickly rise to the 30, 40, 50, and beyond percent of the change sets happening in my code base. Um, and think about, like, it's always going to be faster. The rate of PR creation by machines is going to be faster and faster. Um, there's almost no limit to the speed that this happens at in a given code base. And if we're not thinking about automating how we're handling them, and we're not measuring, like, how often does this happen? What is my process? Do I really need to have a human respond to every one of those? We will drown. If I have to manually review all of these PRs, uh, I will either have to throttle them so I'm not getting all the benefit I can, and I only have capacity to manage a very small percent of the PRs into my code base, um, or I'm like drowning and giving up and not being able to get the full value. So automation is going to be key to enable me to reap the benefits of all these automatic or bot PRs of their various sources and flavors, um, but also govern where is human intervention required, what is the type of changes that really need a human, at what point do I need that human, how do I manage these human their time getting spent reviewing all of this changes. Now is the time to get my arms around automation in my pull request pipeline.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the focus so far with generative AI has been around organizations trying to figure out how they can produce more code at a faster pace, right? But the issue is that I've been saying this for a while, that producing more code doesn't mean you're going to move faster, like alone. In fact, what's probably going to happen is you'll have new bottlenecks that will emerge that will still restrict your ability to scale up the pace of innovation. So if you think about generative AI agents coming in and writing documentation or writing new tests for your repos, or automatically migrating from legacy systems into more modern technologies, producing all of the code to do that is only part of the challenge, right? So it really is going to increase the need for more automated workflows within the software delivery lifecycle, uh, just to optimize, how all of that gets merged into your code base. And I want to give one last shout out to Gitstream, because I think a lot of organizations right now where they're in more of an experimentation phase with this, because they view it as a potentially very disruptive technology, but it's still very early on, so it's hard to know like which which models or products or platforms should you be committing to today. So, one last shout out to Gitstream. We have now started working with organizations that are implementing AI agent workflows into their software delivery. and finding ways to sort of customize these workflows to their specific needs. So yeah, it really is, it's an exciting time, but it's really a great time to take advantage of all the new technologies that are emerging out there.
Yeah, so Gitstream is our, your segue to automating how you're handling PRs. It is now also a great way to start in experimenting with those agents, with the AI agents. So Gitstream directly can give you um, act like an agent that creates tests for you or reviews your PRs. So you can start experimenting. If I had to make an ex like a one recommendation to everyone listening, you need to start feeling this world. You need to understand the automated PR management and how that will work for you. And you need to start experimenting with the different kinds of agents that can give you more value in your code base. These, and you can get both with Gitstream.
Yeah, and I think we've shown like this problem is already here today, right? Like these bots are already here today. So you not only can you solve a problem that you're likely facing in this moment, but you're sort of future proofing you for what's to come in the coming years. So
Yep.
and with that, I want to thank everyone for coming out today. I hope you all learned something really valuable from this. And I want to offer two things to you as you part ways with us today. The first is if you want to get your own custom bot report to see how your organization could leverage workflow automations to more effectively manage Dependabot or Renovate or any other bot service that you might have running on your PR, reach out to us. There'll be a link in chat to speak with an expert and get your own custom report. If you're ready to get started with bot assistance today, we have a few offerings in the LinearB platform. We've already spoken about Gitstream, but there are other capabilities within our platform that use bot assistance to help manage your software delivery lifecycle. So, Yashai, thank you for coming out. Is there anything else that you want to share with our audience before we go?
Yeah, So yeah, thanks everyone, and thanks Ben. This was fun. Um, like you said, this is already probably taking a larger chunk than you think of your developer time in the ratio of code changes that make it into your code base today, and this is gonna grow so like much faster than most of us think. Um, so being ahead of the curve and thinking about how do I automate my response here is crucial.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And everyone, have a
Thank you,
great
everyone.
Tuesday.
This was fun. Goodbye.